Hi, you've clicked onto today's tropical tidbit for Sunday. What you're looking at here is the upward motion map for the globe, with green lines indicating net vertical motion of air upwards and brown representing sinking air. Notice that the two main areas in the tropics of upward motion are still over the maritime continent and over here over northern South America. And this is a pattern that has been consistent recently in looking down the road on the GFS. Here it is showing up. Look at all this green showing up in northern South America and in the Caribbean, and then the orange is showing up still in the Central Pacific with what little green remains over the maritime continents sort of sticking there, and then the brown over the Indian Ocean. This pattern, it's getting towards that time of year where we have to start looking for this as we work our way towards May. Going to be watching to see if these greens remain persistent over here over the Atlantic, sort of foretelling that the season may be active if this pattern remains. And this pattern is really thanks to the fact that the atmospheric portion of the La Nina is holding on very strong, although water temperatures are warming up right now. If we look at the SOI, look where we are, still way up here at the peak that we've been at since October of 2010. Really haven't gone down at all since then, and we're still waiting for the SOI to crash, but we're way up there indicating a strong full-blown La Nina. What's interesting is the speculation with the ENSO models, a lot of them showing us going into an El Nino state, or at least warm neutral, during the hurricane season in the fall and into next winter. I looked back, and since 1950 there's only been 2 years that had a moderate or strong La Nina that reversed all the way to El Nino before the end of the year. One of those was 1951. Here's the SOI for that 3-year period. January of 1951 is right here. Notice that as soon as we crossed over to 1951, the SOI dropped, and by the time we made it to April, we were already in the negative over here, and it set up the El Nino to develop over the course of the summer and the following winter. The next one was 1976, the Great Pacific Climate Shift from cold PDO to warm PDO. Here's January of 1976. Notice how we started dropping off after February and March, and by the time we hit April it was already falling towards neutral over here, and then it went negative during the summer. But this year we're still sitting high and pretty at March over here, way up there with the SOI still near its peak of this La Nina, and if indications continue, April will still be up here somewhere by the end of the month on average. So we're definitely not dropping off the same way these 2 years did, and that argues for the fact that we're probably not going to see an El Nino develop this summer and fall, and it's probably going to be more along the lines of neutral if we do get warm, or a cool neutral, which some of the models are starting to hint at a little bit. It makes sense given that the PDO is still negative, which means that La Ninas tend to hang on longer, and this could become a multi-year event that redevelops next winter. And this will be important for indications of the hurricane season, because that's going to mean that sinking air over the Central Pacific during the summer is going to increase the upward motion over the Atlantic, just like it did last year. And then this is going to set up the idea that if we look for May and June, looking for our first storm, as we always do, it's probably going to be somewhere in the Caribbean, which usually is in the early season. It can be either the Gulf or the Caribbean or off the southeast U.S. coast. I'm leaning towards the Caribbean as we get towards the start of the season, because we're already seeing indications that the atmospheric pattern wants to set up very favorably in here once things start shifting northward in the month of May and June. So we'll be watching for that to see when our first storm comes along in a month or two. Alright, that's it for today. Thanks for watching.